What is in the box, Soundwave?
Hatsune Miku.
What?
Hatsune Miku. Hatsune Miku's in the box.
What is a Hatsune Miku?
So what is the MPG line exactly? This line has existed for around 4 years now, and I still don't really have a read on if it's meant to be a continuation of what Masterpiece was trying to do, or if it's meant to go in a new direction with a different design philosophy. It started with the train bots, which were... The individual bots all had really nice train modes, but all of the robot modes were compromised in some shape or form. And then the combined mode was a complete lump of ass, so you know, not great. Then there's Jinrai and Rat Trap, both of which are good, but clearly are more representative of the traditional Masterpiece line. The new Optimus Prime definitely feels like a step in a new direction. Don't be surprised if a video on that shows up in the future. And then there's Hot Rod, which appears to be an upscaled version of the Studio Series figure with some retooling. Really, the only thing consistent about MPG is all of the repaints. Pretty much what you'd expect there, characters that use the same mold as others in different colors here, Diaclone representation there, but there's one upcoming repaint that left me surprised and confused, that being the show-accurate repaint of MP13 Soundwave. On one hand, given he's a major character, it makes sense to get a Masterpiece Soundwave back onto the market. On the other hand, this figure is over a decade old and is coming out at a time where we have a lot of options for good Soundwave figures. We've had 2 good renditions in the Generations line. The Studio Series 1 in particular came out earlier this year. The Fans Toys rendition is still around for those looking specifically for a Masterpiece version of the character. And if we take the necessity for it to transform out of the equation, then there's also the Blockies versions to contend with. That's some good options, and it begs the question of if MP13 is worth it now. Has it aged to a point where it's now outdated, or does it still hold up after 13 years? Well, let's get into it and find out. Released at the start of the Hisui era of Masterpiece, Soundwave is essentially a hybrid design of the original toy and the original cartoon versions. Admittedly, this is something more noticeable in the robot mode, but it can still be seen here in the sculpted detail that comes from the toy and the color scheme being closer to the show. It's also bulkier than the original toy given the engineering, but that isn't really a big deal. Many of the cassette features are also functional to some degree. We'll get more into the tape deck in a minute, but the volume control and power button can be moved, and the forward and back buttons can be pushed as well, though sadly not the other buttons. There's also some nice extra details on the sides, and the headphone jack can fit an actual headphone cord, though obviously not all the way. This isn't the music player Soundwave, you can't play any actual music on it. That's also a figure that deserves its own video, but I digress. As far as cohesion is concerned, obviously the front and sides are as clean as you'd expect, meanwhile the back section is where things start to fall apart. Honestly though, I think this backside is pretty acceptable all things considered. Could it be better? Yeah, absolutely, but this is far from terrible. Really, it's just this part at the bottom. Fill that in and I think we're good. Same with the top section. The visible hinges aren't major detracting points for me, though I will say I'm not a fan of how there's this little gap for where the head is supposed to sit. But again, super minor stuff here. All of this is rounded off by some lovely metallic paint with little to no paint chipping to boot. So on its own, Soundwave's cassette mode is very good, but of course no cassette mode would be complete without having some cassette tapes. And thankfully, I have the Hasbro release of MP13, which means I have all 5 of them. They even come in their own containers. These guys are pretty much what you'd expect. Nice looking tape on one side, a robot clearly folded into a rectangle on the other. The real question is how well they work with Soundwave. And well, they work pretty well. Sort of. As you'd expect, pressing the top button opens up the tape deck for you to slide the tape of your choice in. However, you can also push the inside of the deck back to fit up to 3 tapes at a time. This is spring-loaded, and pressing this button on the back will bring the tapes forward. It's a fun gimmick, make no mistake, but it also doesn't work the best. If inserted incorrectly, the cassettes may end up getting jammed inside. I had this happen to me before with Rumble, and it's the entire reason why I'm not doing it here. I just don't want to risk it. Apparently the Japanese instructions do warn about this, but Hasbro's don't, so that sucks. And regardless, I feel like for the price you're paying both then and now, I feel like this shouldn't be a problem in the first place. Still, so long as you're careful, this should work just fine. Besides that, you can also do this with Rumble and Frenzy's weapons alongside this other accessory that's more important in robot mode, which is a neat reference to the movie, but isn't something I'm probably ever gonna do again. Overall, MP13's cassette mode is great. Even its worst problem can be sidestepped with proper care, and in terms of display power, it might still be the best of the bunch thanks to its combination of paint and sculpt work that the others lack in one way or the other. But the alt mode is only part of the equation, especially since it's rare to see a cassette Soundwave have a bad alt mode in the first place. Things could easily swing the other way with the robot mode. So let's get into the transformation and get this guy into robot mode. Before getting into Soundwave, I want to briefly talk about the cassette bot's transformation. If you've ever messed with smaller scale transformers, you should be right at home with these guys. Ravage is the only one I would consider a bit tricky, as it could be easy to get confused when getting the limbs the right way up, but other than him, the others are a breeze to do, and shoutouts to Laserbeak and Buzzsaw having their weapons be built in. That is awesome. But getting to the main attraction, MP13 follows the standard G1 Soundwave transformation skeleton, leading to a very smooth process whether going one way or the other. Starting off, we'll pull the bottom section down, then flip it up, bring the silver parts down, fold it all down, and flip these parts to secure it into place. Flip this all the way down, then flip this part like so. Now we can untab the legs, fold them out, and extend the shins. From here, we can untab the feet and put them into place, put the legs into a standing position, then rotate the legs just above the knees to get the shins into proper orientation. And then you can just fold these parts down. Also, don't forget to push the waist back in. With the legs done, we'll simply untab the arms, rotate and tab them into the chest, and fold these parts down. Then it's the simple fold out of the hands, nothing crazy here, and we can also take his gun off his back. This gun's a bit awkward. You want to extend it, then pull down the handle, which is fine, but then you need to grab the tip of it and pull it out, which could end up chipping the silver. Not the best idea, but I found that if you're careful, you should be fine. But once you've done that and tabbed it into either of his hands, you can flip his shoulder cannon around and finally fold this part down to bring up the head. And that's MP13's transformation. Like I said, follows the standard Soundwave transformation to a T. It's one of those transformations you can easily find yourself just fiddling with in your spare time, probably about as difficult as the SS86 version, just in different parts. Really though, there's not much else to say. It's overall a great transformation. Aesthetically, MP13 takes the proportions of the cartoon and combines it with the sticker details of the original toy, and the end result is simply fantastic. Generally speaking, I think that the show designs benefit a lot from having their toy details added to them, and while technically on Soundwave that's only on the shoulders, that alongside the additional mechanical detail does a lot to make this figure look as good as it does. Which of course also includes the head sculpt featuring the Toy Deco yellow eyes. Admittedly not my preferred eye color for Soundwave, but it still looks good, and if you really prefer the red eyes you can always get the Takara version instead. Just keep in mind that you'll only be getting Laserbeak with him and will need to buy the other bots separately. We'll get more into spending later, but for now, since I've brought them up, let's talk about the rest of the cassette bots. They all look fantastic, having the same fusion of toy and cartoon stylings as Soundwave, and are decently articulated. Though I will say Rubble and Frenzy do suffer a little bit from not having swivels at the biceps or elbows, although that might just be a me thing. These two, of course, have their pile drivers, which are a little loose but fit on their arms well enough. You can also place them into this thing and then equip them to Soundwave's forearms as blasters. This looks silly, but it's not intrusive in any way, so it's no big deal. But it should come as no surprise to hear that I prefer Laserbeak and Buzzsaw's ability to perch on these tabs. Now that is the functionality I like to see. As is the ability of storage, as the guns on Rumble and Frenzy's backs can actually be stored inside Soundwave's feet, though as you can probably guess there's only enough room to fit one pair of guns into them. I suppose you can just put the other guns into this clear box. This is meant to be an empty cube used to house Energon that Soundwave would create in the show. Fits onto his chest just fine, but I think it would have looked more impressive if there were parts to have it filled with Energon in it. As it stands, it's just a cube of clear plastic. Then there's another chest piece with a grid pattern on it that you can place on top of the normal chest. Apparently the Takara release had pictures in the instructions you could cut out and put inside to use as a display panel, but the Hasbro version doesn't come with those, so here's a sticker instead. But now alongside Soundwave's standard gun, there's this vacuum cleaner? Oh, it's a sensor, got it. Kinda neat, but I'd rather stick with the gun. There's also some detailed speakers inside the forearm, so I guess that's another weapon you can use. And finally, to round this all off, you get Megatron. This is the exact same gun Megatron that came with MP1, which I've already covered before, and it actually works better here than on MP1 since Soundwave has a much tighter grip. Needless to say, including the cassette bots, there's a lot of accessories here. So, does MP13 have the articulation needed to make the most of them? Well, technically yes, but it's a bit trickier than you might think. Overall, it's pretty much the standard articulation you'd expect out of mainline Transformers. Sadly, ball-jointed heads weren't really being used in the MP line around this time, but the hinge swivel works well enough. On the plus side, the elbows are double-jointed, the fingers are articulated to some extent, and the ankles have a crazy amount of pivot thanks to the transformation joint. Also, really nice that the shoulder gun is posable. Really helps Soundwave's ability to look to his right. Also, there's this joint in the shoulders. Not sure why this is here. Doesn't look good and isn't used in the transformation, but okay, sure. But there's one section of the articulation that doesn't just feel awkward, but in terms of design can feel downright archaic. That being the hips. In order to not break up the sculpt, MP13 has two hip joints. One at the hip for the splits, and one just below it for movement forward with a swivel joint just above the knees. Functionally this works, but ultimately is a pretty awkward way to do things instead of, say, a drop-down system, or just biting the bullet and breaking the sculpt up a bit. But it is manageable, and you can get good poses in spite of it, helped by the die-cast metal at the feet allowing for a good center of balance. So we've got a good-looking robot mode with a bunch of accessories and articulation that, while a bit cumbersome in one spot, overall is pretty good. I think it's safe to say MP13 overall is a good figure, but now we come back to the question we started the video with. Is this figure worth getting when compared to the other Soundwaves that are currently available? Let's go through some numbers. At its current price, MP13's re-release sits at around $245 Canadian before tax, which when combined with the re-releases of the other cassette bots is about $460 Canadian. That's a pretty steep price for a figure this old, although amusingly it is still cheaper than the Fans Toys version, which sits at around $335 Canadian individually and $495 Canadian as a complete set. Comparing these two is tricky, as Fans Toys I'd argue has more interesting accessories and the ability to switch between the show and toy details, and has better articulation in some parts, with better hips, an ab crunch, a ball-jointed head and wrist hinge, and individually articulated fingers. But the cassettes from what I've seen seem to be pretty hit or miss among those who have them, and even if you get it without the cassettes, Fans Toys version is still $90 more expensive than Takara's. It's really going to come down to personal preference between these two, but I think overall MP13 is probably still worth getting over Fans Toys. No, the real challenge comes from the mainline releases. Generations has been on a roll when it comes to the G1 cast, and you're actually sort of spoiled for choice in regards to Soundwave. You could go for the Legacy United version that has Buzzsaw, Ravage, and Rumble for something a little more stylized, or if you're really into show accuracy, there's the Studio Series 86 version that has Buzzsaw, Ravage, and Laserbeak. Oh, and have I mentioned these guys have nearly the exact same articulation of the MP, just without the weird hip system? Or how any cassette bot they don't come with has a Legend Scale version you can get? And to top it off, they're at the leader price point. Sure, not exactly what one would call cheap, but when compared to the MP, it's night and day. And I've only been talking about the versions of Soundwave that transform. Bring in the Blockies version with it being even cheaper, and this can get even worse. Make no mistake, MP13 is a good figure. It looks great, has a fantastic transformation, comes with plenty and poses well, but is simply outdone by the mainline versions being able to do nearly everything it can while also being around a third of the price. It isn't bad, but I think it's fair to say that it is outclassed. I don't think it will surprise you to hear that Soundwave will fit in just fine with your MP collection, right? At 22 centimeters, he matches up just fine when put next to other MPs, which sadly I don't have a lot of, but hopefully the ones I do have alongside other figures will give you a good idea on how he'll look in your collection. With all that I've already said, you're probably expecting me to say that you're better off getting the mainline Soundwaves over the MP. And if you're just starting out collecting, or can only afford to get one figure at this time and really want a Soundwave, then you'd be right. I think for the most part it's better to collect mainline Transformers than the MPs at this point. But the thing is, there's nothing to say you can't get both. Obviously, I'm not trying to say you should spend money you don't have, but there's nothing wrong with getting multiple versions of the same character if you think those figures are worth it. Do you know how many different versions of Optimus Prime, Spider-Man, or Sonic I have? And who says you can't just buy this MP and none of the others, or vice versa? There's nothing wrong with having a one-off. Collecting is meant to be a fun hobby, and if you think MP13 is something you want, then who am I to tell you otherwise? In spite of its flaws, MP13 is still a great figure, and while it may not be the best, that doesn't mean it isn't still worth it. That being said, I do hope the next time we get a Masterpiece Soundwave, it is a new figure. But with all that being said, we're at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Sorry it's been a while since the last one. To be completely honest, I've kind of been in a bit of a rut on what to do lately. And when I finally did figure out what I wanted to make, one of the figures I was going to review broke, so you know, Hopefully you guys won't have to wait long for that one, or the next video for that matter. Also, you better believe that I'm going to make a video on the Collector's Edition Metal Sonic. Oh, if that figure isn't good, I'm going to be so mad! Sorry. Anyway, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.